a lot of changes are happening right now, big guy, right, with the Coast Guard. And so you have a lot of people in here that are future leaders or current leaders. I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts about those changes and for us kind of how we can envision what a leader looks like in the future of all these different changes with the Coast Guard is going through. You know, we're not going to have just a commandant anymore. We're going to have a commandant and a secretary of the Coast Guard. You know, so how does that affect the position of MCPOG? How does that affect us down here on this level? So just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, well, first and foremost, that I mean, let's put everything in perspective. First of all, there's a lot of noise going on externally, particularly with the new administration, what the administration does, and so forth. I encourage, I implore people to ignore the noise. Focus on what has to be done and how it has to be done. Right now in the Coast Guard, we are in, I think, I think, a wonderful period of change. If you take out the noise, and what I mean by that wonderful period of change is the fact that in my 53 years of affiliation with the Coast Guard, I don't even look like I'm 53 years old. But I look back at that particular time and I've seen lots and lots and lots of changes. And so let's talk on the first one, because I don't want to make this a very long answer. This is another podcast itself. But the quick part of it is that I came into service at the time when, for the Coast Guard and its need of things, the resources, the assets, the people that were needed, and watching the growth of the Coast Guard at that particular time, we always fell short at the front door when it came to particularly the financial resource and so forth. When we were under the Department of Transportation, I came in when we were under the Department of Transportation. Gosh, I don't think any of you in there came in during that time. That signs of really being old. But I came in at a time that under the Department of Transportation, we were, and I will tell you, I've gone on record and said this. I almost got kicked out of a congressional hearing saying exactly this statement, was that it was a bad fit for the Coast Guard. It was a bad fit for the Coast Guard because we were in a department, a very important government department, where the priorities of the Department of Transportation is, I want to fly safe and fix my potholes. Okay, that's what the taxpayers thought about the Department of Transportation. And then there's the Coast Guard there. And what the hell is the Coast Guard in there for? This isn't important to me. I want to fly safe and fix my potholes, right? Okay, so 9/11 happens. The creation of Department of Homeland Security comes about. We go into a department that now has a little bit more teeth to it because of what the nature and the missions of what the Department of Homeland Security are to the Coast Guard. But still, we have competing interests to deal with that, because we now have ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement. We've got CBP, Customs Border Protection, TSA, Transportation Security Administration. We got other bigger competing interests that we're dealing with that. Now, while we might be the biggest team in town by virtue of assets and compared to the other services, we still have big competing interests that, to the taxpayer, it is still that particular concern before you look at the Coast Guard. Now, the Coast Guard gets to inch up a little bit more because the Coast Guard does involve from the law enforcement side on migrant interdiction, as well as drug interdiction and so forth, things like that. But still, to John and Jane Q public out there, the Coast Guard just isn't crystallized in that particular fashion. And so our commandants of the past has always been able to, like I said, get to the front door about the needs for the Coast Guard and what the Coast Guard have and can do. But few things people understand, that the commandant of the Coast Guard, as with other military service chiefs, they cannot, by law, advocate for funding and so forth. You can ask. You can only go to Congress and ask. Okay, that's all you can do. And then Congress, they can wave at you, and that's it. But nothing comes behind that. A service secretary can actually do that lobbying piece for you, because that service secretary is a political appointee and is not encumbered with with shaking hands and kissing babies in terms of getting the things that the service needs are. Now, the risk factor to this is because it's a political position, is that do you get the right person? You could get a service secretary that donated an awful lot of money to the administration, and that's the only definition they know of that particular service. Or you might get somebody who has at least a little bit of knowledge and legacy and able to carry forth the piece of that. That's a risk, and that's the risk for having that particular service secretary. So I have seen over the course of my 4 years in my position as Master Chief of the Coast Guard, watch my commandant and I because I would go to the hearings with them, and then I would say my 2 cents. This is where I almost got kicked out of the hearing because he's up there talking about what the Coast Guard needs. He's talking about the issues, concerns, and so forth. But that's it. That's it. He doesn't have any opportunity afterwards to keep going back to Congress to say, "Look, I got 60-year-old ships, 50-year-old planes. Look, the Navy. When a ship is 20 years old, guess what happens to it? It's gone." That's exactly their legacy overall. When a ship is 20 years old in the Coast Guard, what do we say? That thing is still brand new. Let's face it. Let's look at that. I mean, and the aircraft and all those other kinds of things. So let's put this in a perspective where I say this is an engaging, challenging time because at the very least, the potential, because Congress still has to approve the budget, the potential is the Coast Guard gets a lot of money that moves forward with this Force Design 28 fashion and so forth, that it can really, really change the landscape for the Coast Guard overall. Okay, but it cannot do that appropriately and effectively if you don't have the right kind of facilitation at the top to be able to make that happen. So I'm encouraged. I'm always a glass half full kind of guy. I'm also going to say publicly, because this is going to come out in a podcast, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, folks. Okay, so I want to make that very clear to you that I am not jumping on all of this because I've got some excitement with this administration. I don't, but what I do have is my excitement for what this administration can do for our service, and that's what I'm buying in on. Of course, provided that everything works through. So my advice overall here to our people who have anxieties at this point: back out the noise. Back out the noise. Don't pay attention to what else is going on external to this. Focus in on what we do to focus to the support and to build success of our Coast Guard. We've got a 235-year legacy of making things happen. But sadly, in that 235-year legacy of making things happen, we always did it with less or almost nothing at all and made things happen. And I know I'm going too far in this, but I'm just gonna add this part back to when the Coast Guard was then called the Revenue Cutter Service. In the War of 1812, Revenue Cutter Eagle went up against an armada of British ships, and they didn't have enough weapons, they didn't have enough ammo, anything. You know what the Eagle did? When the cannons fired at the Eagle, the crew would take the cannonballs that were fired at them and fire it back. And had a successful combat out of that. I mean, we could be proud of that, but at the same time, I say that's proof to back in 1812 that we did everything with nothing, So do we want to continue to have that and rejoice around that particular effort? I should say not. And that's why it's important for us to, hey, look, it's time for us to step up with the big dogs, and this is that opportunity to do that.
Absolutely.
You all have heard the challenge that the big guy has thrown out there for us. With everything that you've heard him say and understanding the lay of the land right now, I have a question for every one of you.
How do we improve the service? I think it was the big guy that talked about setting the pace, right? How do we set the pace and create the right change right now? What does that look like? What is it that we need to change and moving forward? Go ahead, whoever's first, and then everybody I want to hear from every single person. Go ahead, Big Lamar, Mr. Lamar.
I take the shot at this one. Master Chief hit a lot of the stuff that I was hoping he was gonna hit on as far as like the budget and the lobbying for money and stuff like that. I would say kind of like on his same note, like not drinking the Kool-Aid, but looking at it as a service. I think for the first time I know in my 14 years of Coast Guard career, it's the first time ever the Coast Guard has a mission that's number one. We have a like search and rescue. We got 11 core missions that the Coast Guard do everywhere, but I think it's the first time in our service history that one mission we're putting of most importance. So you kind of like, even we might not agree with it, we might not like think like this mission is more important than this mission, blah blah blah, but we have we have a direction for the first time. Like, hey, we know this is where we're going. Like, hey, this is, as right now with this administration, border protection is the number one mission for the Coast Guard. So we know that. There's no reason to fight it. Everything we do for the next little while, that's what it's going to be based towards. So you kind of already know how to set yourself up, at least for now. I think personally though, I think it's a great time to be wherever you at, because Force Design 28, they trying to get, I think they said like 15,000 more people in the Coast Guard. I'm a prior recruiter. I know for a fact that's not going to happen. Where they going to put them? But to that same point, if they're trying to get 15,000 more people, they got to move some people up. They got to move some people around. They got to move. People going to get moved around, bumped up, all type of stuff. Why not put, everybody should be putting themselves in the best position to move forward. It's going to be, I mean, they almost have to. They can't bring in 15,000 non-rates. The service can't go like that. It's too bottlenecked at the bottom. You got to flow it to where it's like, it got to flow properly in order for it to move forward correctly. So I think is whatever rank you at, wherever you at in your mindset of like what you want out the service, whether it's a couple more years or something like that, if it's not like the whole career, I think now is definitely the time to start to think about like, hey, Force Design 28, it's gonna put me in a position that I wouldn't probably have got if Force Design 28 wasn't a thing. It's kind of like where, even though I'm probably the newest JO in my unit, but I'm the only prior service one. That's just what I preach to the ward, not preach to the wardroom, but I tell the wardroom like, hey, you hear all the questions, you hear all the noise, you hear social media, you hear all that stuff. Just think about what they're saying though. Just take a piece of like of the words. They're trying to get 15,000 people. I'm about to get promoted, is what I'm thinking in my mind. Hey, let me make sure my OER is good. Let me make sure I'm good at my job. Let me take care of these people. They're going to see that and be like, all right, I don't know who Lamar is, but let me fly them this way. You know, that's just where my mind is. And I think we all should be trying to put ourselves in the best position to level up to that next level. Because now that next level is definitely attainable. That's just how I see it.
I agree with Lamar. I think wherever you're at right now is the best place because you can only fix where you're at right now. So you can't focus on anywhere else or anything else. So as long as you're critiquing your craft and other people's craft where you're at and your interpersonal crafts, it'll all flow. As long as you set yourself up for it. Your personal RPQs, if you will.
I think Matt Shane hit it. Like, we have these aging cutters, and we're still, I think we're expected to keep them for the next 15 to 20 years. I'm on one of them, and making it better than what you found it, and understanding the reason why. Like, these non-rates, like, oh, this ship's so old, why do I have to improve this? Because the Coast Guard plans to have this thing around for a long time. And so, and the meaning of that is you're gaining that experience off a legacy cutter that you're going to have to take to a new cutter someday. If you plan to stay in the Coast Guard, you're probably going to get back on another ship. You're going to take that hard work and dedication of turning something that didn't look that great to something that actually looks presentable to a new cutter and have that pride into it. And so I think those people learning those things, we also got to understand these guys think different than us. They're younger. They see things different than us. And you got to have this conversation and see, why do you think different? How do you think different? And how do you take their vision and help them improve themselves and be in the Coast Guard for a long period of time? And I think that's what my job has taught me, is like, I get to talk to a lot of the young guys and understand that they think differently and they don't have the pride of the Coast Guard like I have, because I've been in it when I felt like it was at is most greatest in the early 2010s, in my opinion. So when all those new cutters were coming out and we were all excited, I think that was when I was my most prideful in the Coast Guard. But these guys are coming when a tumultuous time in the Coast Guard where they don't see that. And we have to understand that and get them excited about the future of the Coast Guard as well. I know we got to weed out some noise, but there's a lot of message traffic that comes across almost every day. We got to talk to them about this and what this means to them in their career. I made it a point of everybody in the ops department, because they're all petty officers. There's no non-rates in this department. You have to read the message board. And we're going to have conversations about the message board and what these messages mean for the cutter, for you, for the future of the Coast Guard. So that's something we do in the ops department, because these petty officers have to be informed of what's next and what's coming and how's it going to transform the Coast Guard in your position. Because some of those messages saying your position is not going to be here next year. So what does that mean for you? That means you're probably transferred. So they have to know this stuff.
Excellent.
I'll add to that. Yeah. One of the things I'm hearing is what needs to be strengthened. The administration, everything that's been going down the pipeline now has been asking us to do more, has asking us to perform these levels of mission sets that we're already performing, but now they're like wanting more. So as a leader, going back to like tying it into the subject, as a leader, how do I present that to my junior members asking, we need to do more. But how do I need to know that I need to strengthen them first through education, like Senior Chief was saying, like if they don't know something, they're not going to buy into it. So now I have to frame things in a way to where they understand what's being asked, strengthen what they don't know, and also kind of give them that self of like, what does that look like? Is that more training as being empathetic, more emotional intelligence? Are we going to be now having to look into building up more resilience? Because we're going to be asking them to do more stuff. Administration's asking us as a service to do more. So now as a service, we need to look in within ourselves and see like, and I'm really a big advocate for mental health. So it's like, how's that going to impact our people now? We need to make sure that we shore up all these loose ends that we're already having issues with, because now it's just going to get worse if we don't act now to address certain potholes that we have. So I think as leaders, we need to be able to recognize these weaknesses and seeing how that can impact us now that we're going to be supporting this new direction. So we can't forget about that part either, the maintenance that needs to get done. If I were to use my gunner's mate terms, the maintenance, the PMS, the preventive maintenance, because I don't want us to go down a slippery slope where now we're having a retention issue more than what we're already having, because we're not taking care of our people to support this new direction.
You know,
Yeah.
that's, I almost jokingly, although it's no longer a joke, calling Chief Rogers a future Master Chief of the Coast Guard. That's, let me tell you, Chief, you're right on in that whole part of the focus that you see, what's important, what the concerns are, and so forth. And that, of course, are those very, very comments, as well as a platform that the future Master Chief of the Coast Guard has to address. I had the privilege, and I think only Jerome knows this. It's no longer a secret. It was somewhat of a secret, but it's no longer a secret. But I had the privilege of being at the big table when this Force Design 28 was being uncovered, what was going on and so forth, and how I was invited. First of all, it was just like at a congressional hearing when I thought I got thrown out for mouthing off about the Department of Transportation. And here I am in the lion's den, that my concern of these things that are being pushed out right now, how this is going to impact our people in the service and so forth. And I guess I was asked to because they needed to hear that. That the big concern I have is that, okay, the 15,000 people, like Mr. Lamar says, we're not going to get 15,000 people overnight. Number one. Number two, if you got this concept of 15,000 people, these 15,000 people are not going to be second class, first class, or chiefs or whatever overnight. All this has got to be worked up into looking at what our current assets, resources that we have, what we have to do that. So we've got to be realistic about what we're doing here and how to focus toward that. The greater part of this is, as Chief Rogers pointed out, is the mental health perspective, is that our service has been stretched, always been stretched thin, and more so than maybe ever before, because like I said, we keep demonstrating how we can do so much more with less. We're just going to keep doing it because Congress is going to say, you guys just proved you did this, this, and this, But so more importantly, we got to look at built into this Force Design 28 It's how we are truly going to take care of our people to be successful at what needs to be done. You know, come on, let's face it, folks. The Coast Guard as a military service is not a fluffy service by virtue of the fact of the tasks and responsibilities that it has to do and carry out any more than you require from the Army, from the Navy, and so forth. But that said, is the fact that you've got to look at our service in the same manner how you look at those other services, with how that workforce needs are and what has to be done. So the bottom line here comes down to that it's on the backs of this the commandant, who of course acting now becomes the new commandant, his master chief of the Coast Guard, whoever that person may be, and to be able to at least comprehend and better comply and implement the results of this Force Design 2028 and be effective of that. It's about the people, because if you don't take care of the people or do the things you want, you just fell flat on your face and you've done nothing. So that's been the concept that I've always put out in front to them. I've had this conversation privately, and which now sounds openly, to the commandant as well as to the master chief of the Coast Guard, that we need to keep that focus toward our people overall. I mean, it's great, wonderful to get all these people, all this money, all these other kinds of things that are necessary, but until we get the needs of the infrastructure for our people, nothing's going to work. Nothing's going to happen.
Man, that is great stuff. Big guy. I just want to say this. I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone else on this call today or this episode. You are a gem for our communities, right? You are a treasure. I can't think of any other place that you would be able to find a conversation like this happening, where you have someone of your prestige and your experience talking across multiple generations of the Coast Guard, and not just speaking about personal things, but also talking about the higher level stuff going on in the Coast Guard. Thank you for coming on and having this conversation with us and allowing us to, interview you, question you, and you firing back at us too. Thank you for being who you are. I say the same thing to all of my peers here as well. I don't take for granted the fact that each of you are here. You've taken time out of your Saturdays to come.
For senior leaderships, this is a normal thing for us. I think the fact that Lynn's here on a Saturday at the rate that she is speaks volumes that she wants, what she thinks about the organization. So I think that's a great thing.
We hope people that are tuning in decide to be involved in the conversation. That's it for this episode. Thank y'all for tuning in. Y'all have a great day.